Afternoon, everyone. Vicki King here, nurse health coach here at Denver. Um, and today we're going to talk about the dangers of high cholesterol. I want to thank everyone for signing up for the webinar, attending. Um, I think that I'm going to be able to give you some good information that not only is going to help you earn health coaching credit, but it's hopefully going to be able to help you apply it to your life. And um, if you see foresee any health changes that you are going to be able to improve your cholesterol numbers, hopefully after hearing some information today, it's going to make you a little bit more interested in making those changes. I do want to, first of all, remind you at the end of the presentation, you're going to see a quiz with a link. I will be sending that link to every email with what you registered for. You'll need to complete the quiz within 30 days so that you can get the health coaching credit that you're going to deserve for completing this. And also, just as a quick reminder, in case I forget at the end, physicals are due by June the 30th. You will want to make sure and get your physical scheduled, your lab scheduled. You'll have a subsequent follow-up medical review with myself, and any other health coaching appointments that you might need, we can schedule with myself. We can schedule with Liz, the dietitian. You can earn health coaching credits by doing the presentation as you are doing today. So let's get started. Oh, one more thing. You are able to ask questions. I'll be looking at my screen periodically to see for any questions you might have. If I'm getting lots of questions, then I will definitely try to answer those at the end. I'll stay and answer all the questions. So let's go ahead and can everybody hear me? No. Are you able to hear any better? Can you hear me better now? I apologize as we're trying to get this perfect for everybody to be able to hear. It sounds like more and more people are able to hear me better. So if I tend to get away from the speaker and it's not as clear, please somebody flag me in that question box, just as many of you already done, and we will try to fix it. Okay, let's take care of the dangers of high cholesterol. So on your screen, you can see that yucky, yellowish, waxy substance inside the artery. That artery can represent anywhere in your body. It can be in your head, your brain, it could be in your heart, it could be in your kidney. Wherever plaque may build up, it causes a problem, and we want to alleviate that. In just this week alone, I have had 2 instances of friends and an acquaintance family members, friends that have suffered a stroke. More likely than not, those strokes are caused from cholesterol that's built up inside the artery, and maybe one part of that plaque that I'm pointing to right now has broken off and went into a tinier vessel in the unfortunately causes stroke. So let's find out what we can do to help prevent strokes, heart attacks, or loss of blood. Just a reminder about completing that Survey Monkey quiz after the webinar. Again, I'll be sending you the link with the email that you registered for the webinar with. Um, there are 3 to 4 questions, at least 2 of those questions need to be answered correctly. And once we receive those quizzes completed within 30 days, we will give you that 1 credit. Okay, so the beginning artery is what we're born with. We have a very open lumen. The opening is called the lumen. As time progresses through physical inactivity, through dietary changes, we can get the end result down here, this narrowed artery that's been blocked with plaque and a blood clot. But it starts with something very tiny, very insignificant, with a tiny tear in the artery wall. We're going to find out what part of that lipid panel that we see starts this tear in the artery wall. More and more of us are hearing, I think, from our doctors that triglycerides, watch your triglycerides, watch your sugar intake. Triglycerides, the HDL, the LDL, and the VLDL are all important numbers in knowing your cholesterol panel. The triglycerides is the part of the cholesterol that's most associated with increased risk for heart disease and stroke. If the individual eats foods frequently from high-calorie sources, such as candy, sweetened beverages, white bread, white pastas, crackers, pretzels, those individuals may have elevated triglycerides. That's because those foods give an excess amount of calories that we don't need, and so the body stores them. It stores them in the event that we're going to run the 5K marathon. Unfortunately, we often don't run that 5K marathon, and so that storage builds up, and we can see that in the triglycerides. Someone just mentioned that they weren't able to hear me. Can you hear me better now? One reason, or there's several reasons, why the triglycerides might increase. A big one is physical inactivity. Someone that is sedentary, doesn't get much exercise, drinks alcohol in excess, has a high carbohydrate diet, or those foods that are excessive in calories, if they're overweight, if they smoke, if they have high blood pressure, type 2 diabetes, and genetics, all can lead to elevated triglyceride levels. The ideal number for you when you have your labs drawn is to be 150 or less. The next number is the HDL. I remember the H for high. We want that number as high as we can get it, because they are the cleaners. They are the ones that are going to come through and try to clean anything that has stuck to the inside of that artery wall. So it makes sense. If we want that number to be high, we want to have as many cleaners as we can to keep that yucky large particle cholesterol from sticking to the inside of the artery wall. What's going to cause your HDL to go low? Well, if you're physically inactive, if you're overweight, if you have a diet that's high in those excess calories, so the carbohydrates, the sugars, and if you eat very little to no fiber, and again, your genetics can have an effect on having low HDL or good cholesterol. So what kind of number should we have? Well, it varies between males and females. A male should have the very minimum of 40, and it can go all the way up to 90, whereas the female needs to have a minimum of 45 and go all the way up to 90. However, doctors, cardiologists will say that if you can get your good cholesterol, the HDL, to at least 60, you give your cardiovascular system such a good measure of protection that's going to help come through and fight to clean out the artery, clean out any tiny deposits that may have been left behind. So again, to increase that HDL, we want to increase our physical activity, and we want to eat fibrous foods, and we want to really watch our sugar or carbohydrate intake. LDL is opposite of the HDL. I remember LDL with L. I want to keep it low. It's considered the bad cholesterol. Too much of this bad cholesterol can increase the risk of that plaque formation on the inside of the artery wall, which we know can lead to the heart attack, can lead to the stroke, or can lead to the loss of a limb or another organ. The ideal range for a person for their LDL is without heart. There's two different numbers. So when you have came for your medical review, or if you're going to come for your medical review, you may see that on your biomeasure it is less than or equal to 130. When I learned medical labs in nursing school, I was taught that LDL should be less than 100. The difference with the biomeasure of 130 here at Endress-Hauser is if a person does not have heart disease, if they are not a diabetic, a doctor will typically be okay if that LDL particle number goes up to 130. Personally, I believe that it should be as close to 100 or less to give you more security. There's also a number that some people don't hear a lot about, and I've had a lot of kind of surprise looks when I start to talk about the VLDL. Many questions as to what it is. It's a very important part of your cholesterol panel. It has LDL in it, so we know it's one of the bad ones. So it needs to be kept low. It is the composition of the VLDL is different from the composition of the LDL. If you had a particle of LDL, I would picture it being like a bottle of water that you add some oil to. Those large particles of LDL of cholesterol are going to sit on the surface of that water, and it's not going to mix in. The VLDL, I would resemble that more like grains of sand. If you If you took some grains of sand and you dropped those in that same bottle of water, and you, thank you for, I changed one thing there for a second, thank you. Um, if you drop some grains of sand into that same bottle of water, because of their density and their complexity in nature, those grains of sand are going to drop to the bottom of that bottle of water. No matter how you turn that bottle of water, those grains of sand are going to sink, the globs of oil are going to float. So the problem with the VLDL is their complex nature. They are made out of primarily triglycerides. What are triglycerides? The triglycerides, remember, are the sugar content, those excess calories. So as the tiny, dense, hard particles are floating through the artery wall, they hit the artery wall and they cause inflammation, they cause the injury. Recall the first slide where we seen that tiny tear in the artery wall. That's what is happening with these very small, dense, hard particles. They're hitting that artery wall and they're causing an area of inflammation. When they cause the area of inflammation, inflammation is the precursor to disease. If you have a lot of these small, dense, hard particles constantly slamming into the artery wall, then you have increased inflammation. When that hard, dense particle hits the artery wall and causes a tear, causes inflammation, then those large particles, the LDL, they get attracted to that area, and that's where they start to set up and build up and create the plaque process. So what is the range for these very tiny, dense particles? We should keep that range between 5 and 35. And again, because VLDL is primarily triglycerides, and we recall that triglycerides are increased when we eat foods in excess calories, like the soda, the candy, the pizza. Excuse me. The more you, excuse me. I got a tickle, I'm sorry. The more you have of those excess calories, the increased risk you have of increasing those tiny, dense particles. So if the lab results that you received here for 2018 or the ones that you're going to receive, if they're not ideal, are you already predestined that you're going to have some type of a heart disease or a stroke? The great thing is, no. You can make some lifestyle changes, you can make some behavior changes, and you can decrease your risk. You can improve the quality of your arteries throughout your body. So triglycerides, let's start with triglycerides. How can you reduce those triglycerides? It's going to be the opposite of what increased them. Reducing those foods that have the high sugar content, the high carbohydrate content, the high calorie content, reducing alcohol intake, increasing physical activity. HDL, that's the good cholesterol. That's the one that we want to have as high as we can get it because they're the cleaners. If you had 60 people cleaning your house constantly, how would that look? It would probably look awesome. If you had only 20 people cleaning your house and you always were having a party inside your house, how would that look? Probably not as awesome. We want to have as many cleaners as we can get. How does that HDL improve? It improves with increasing that physical activity, increasing fiber in our diets, fatty types of fish like salmon and tuna, ground flaxseed, chia seed. Nuts are a great source of omega-3s, avocados, avocado oil, olive oil, losing weight. And the last one, treating your gut health. By improving your gut health through probiotics, that's an excellent way to increase your HDL. Your gut health is linked so closely with other parts of your health. Here it is, we find that it can be linked with increasing your good cholesterol, which is what we want. So those large particles, remember the bottle of water that sits on the surface. And at first, remember, as it's floating through that artery, remember how it just sits on that surface. It can kind of glide. It's the tiny, dense particles that cause the injury that these then get activated in. But how can we keep those large particles decreased? Again, physical activity, increasing that physical activity and losing some weight, decreasing or eliminating those fast foods, those processed foods, those foods that increase our LDL, such as fried foods that are from restaurants. Watching the oils that we use at home when we're cooking and avoiding the corn oil, the canola oil, the vegetable oil, the sunflower oil. Those are all very, they contribute greatly to increasing those large particle cholesterols. When we go to restaurants, they're going to use the cheapest oil that they can get because they want to save money. They're using the vegetable oil, they're using the canola oil, the corn oil. So therefore, if it has been cooked in any type of oil such as those, we are increasing inflammatory processes and we're increasing those large particle cholesterol. Eating fatty fish and seafood a couple of times a week will improve that LDL. Robin brought around a matcha tea in March, the green tea Hulk smoothie. That had some matcha tea in it that has some LDL improving qualities, so it can improve your cholesterol to drink the matcha tea. Eating those high fibrous foods and eliminating sugars from the diet. So I've made up some sample cholesterol values, and by what we talked about this afternoon, I want to see if you can figure out if this person might be in trouble or not. Let's go up here to the first one. So the A1C is an important part of a person's lab value because it tells us how you are metabolizing sugar. So if you are metabolizing sugar appropriately, then your A1C should be 5.7 or less. If your body is not metabolizing that sugar appropriately, then you will see that A1C begin to increase. Well, since we know here in the last few minutes that sugar increases triglycerides and it increases those very small dense particles, I really feel strongly that seeing the A1C along with the lipid panel is really, really important. So again, let's look up here at the individual. Her A1C is 5.1. Her total cholesterol number is 194. Now, Okay, so the total cholesterol number is 194. About 30 years ago, when we drew cholesterol numbers, a doctor may have looked at the total cholesterol number and seen that it was under 200 and said, "You're good to go. Your cholesterol is under 200, and I'm happy with that." Today, because we can look at the triglycerides, the HDL, the LDL, the VLDL, we can see that those numbers are so important. Recalling that the triglycerides should be under 150, and this individual's is. They're 149. The HDL, recall she's a female, should be at least 45, and this individual's is 40. The LDL, I'm going to go by the medical standard of 100 or less. Hers is slightly elevated at 125. The VLDL should be between 5 and 35, and she's within range. So what might her cholesterol and artery look like for her? Well, the HDL is the cleaners of the house. They're the cleaners of the artery. She doesn't have enough of them. She should have at least 45, and cardiologists say if you can get it to 60, you have a great measure of protection. She doesn't have enough cleaners. Her LDL, those large particles, should be 100 or less, or if we went up to 130, let's say that she doesn't have diabetes and she doesn't have heart disease at this point that we are aware of. So even at 130, she's pushing that 130. The very low density lipoprotein, she's within range at 5 to 35. However, she's toward the high end of the range. So the more tiny dense particles she has, that is hitting the artery wall, potentially causing that tear, that inflammation, leading her LDL, that is a little bit higher than we would like at the medical standard of 100, the possibility of building up on that torn area, and she doesn't have a whole lot of cleaners coming through and trying to clean up what possibly may have started. And yet, her total cholesterol is less than 194. So that gives you an example of why we cannot just look at total cholesterol. Let's look right below it at the total cholesterol of 208. This individual's A1C is 5.9. The triglycerides are 179. Her HDL is 41. Her LDL is 135, and her VLDL is 41. So if we just looked at the total cholesterol, we would say, she might be having some problems. But because we can look at the other parts, we can see how significant her problems might begin to be. So her triglycerides should be less than 150, so she's at 179. Her HDL should be 45, and she's at 41. Her LDL is 135, and I'm going with the medical standard of 100. And her VLDL is 41. She has increased her risk by increasing her triglycerides. What I did not tell you is this is the same person just a year later. She has increased her risk of more plaque being built up inside of her artery wall. One, by increasing her triglycerides. And when she increased her triglycerides, she increased those tiny, dense particles that is inside of her artery. She also increased her large particles. So if one of those particles hits that artery wall, starts the inflammatory process, she has more large particles that are going to say, oh, let's go have a party and hang out there. And her HDL still is not high enough to help clean out those particles that have started to build up. We have one more I want to look at, and that's where the A1C is 7.9. I had mentioned when I first started talking about these cholesterol values here, sample ones, that sugar, as we know, when your body is not metabolizing your sugar, your A1C increases. We would know the triglycerides typically are increased, and so are those very tiny, dense particles. But what's interesting with these numbers, look at this person's total cholesterol. This is a male. The total cholesterol number is 179. So 30, 40 years ago, when doctors would pull these cholesterol values and they seen that number, they may say, well, your cholesterol is under 200. You are good to go. However, let's look just a little bit below that. Triglycerides, 220. Those triglyceride numbers should be 150 or less. So because his triglycerides are elevated, we know his tiny, dense particles are also going to be increased. His HDL, he is a male, it should be at least 40. It's only at 38. So he does not have a whole lot of those cleaners going through trying to clean out anything that may have got stuck to that artery wall. However, look at his LDL. His LDL particles are less than the 100. They're at 99. That's probably the best value out of all the numbers there. He has really increased his risk of that plaque being built up inside of his artery walls for probably a couple of different reasons. Yes, it may be genetics. More so, he probably has a diet that's high in those excess calories, those excess carbohydrates or sugars. He probably does not have a whole lot of physical activity. And again, genetics can play a part in that. He has a good number of these, and that number is actually good. It could get less. It's less than 100 is ideal. This number is what concerns me. His very small, dense particles are extreme, 5 to 35. So that means as that blood is flowing through that artery, the heart beats 60 to 90 beats in 1 minute. So that means all of these particles are flowing through that one artery that you're thinking of right now, in the brain, in the heart, in the limbs. These particles are flowing through that one artery 60 to 90 times in 1 minute. There's a likelihood, a very big likelihood, that these tiny, dense particles are going to hit that artery wall and begin an inflammatory process. And when that inflammatory process begins, even though this is less than 100, that's when these get acclimated to that part of that artery wall and begin that plaque process. I want, if you would, to look at the triglycerides on all of these individuals and then look at the VLDL, especially on these two when we know it's the same woman just a year apart. When her triglycerides increased, as here, so did her tiny, dense particles. The year before, when they were less, so were the tiny, dense particles. So if we can decrease our triglycerides, we decrease those very small, dense, compact particles, which then decreases the likelihood of one of them touching the artery wall and beginning that inflammatory process. And then, again, if we decrease that inflammatory process, we decrease the risk of these large particles accumulating inside the artery wall. Do I have any questions currently? So this link, you can write it down, but I'm going to send this link to everyone through their email. To earn your 1 coaching session credit, you'll need to complete the SurveyMonkey quiz. The link and the PDF of the slides are attached to this webinar. If you're interested in printing those off, you're more than welcome to. In July the 11th, we will be doing another presentation, and it will be on diabetes and blood sugar management. We will turn that into a webinar, and you will have 30 days to complete the quiz, just as you do for this time, in order to earn a health coaching credit. You can earn 2 health coaching credits by doing these webinars. There is a question. The question was commenting on cooking with coconut oil. Coconut oil is a saturated fat, and if you have followed any health news here lately, you may have heard 2 sides to the story, where one side may say cooking with coconut oil is healthy, and others may say, well, it's a saturated fat and it will contribute to those large particle cholesterol. Coconut oil, what I have in my study and what I have found in the results that I have seen people who have started using the coconut oil, their numbers have actually decreased. It is a natural oil. The coconut oil, the oils like the corn oil, the vegetable oil, the canola oil, those are heated to such high degrees, and several chains are created. And the body is not able to break down those chains. The coconut oil does not have those chains, therefore it doesn't contribute to that large particles of cholesterol. So my recommendation to help with cholesterol numbers, to help with overall health, is to use that coconut oil, the olive oil, versus those other inflammatory causing oils. Does that answer your question? You're welcome. Does anybody else have any other questions? Well, I appreciate every one of you coming and taking time to complete the webinar today. I apologize for the sound. I think that we've got that figured out. When we do it in July, hopefully we don't have these same issues. I think we figured exactly out what we need to do from the get-go. If anyone has any questions, again, my name is Vicki King. I am the health coach here at the Endres Hauser Clinic. My email address at the end, Vicki, V-I-K-K-I _King @ahni.com. My phone number here in the health coaching room, 317-530-1969. I will make sure and send this link to all the emails here shortly. Thank you so much for your time.